As of recording today, it is just a couple of days away from the 2025 NFL Draft. Although I do have another video that I'm working on. It's not quite ready yet and probably won't be for a little bit. So I wanted to make one before the draft, and I wanted to talk specifically about the quarterbacks of the draft, but not of this one. You see, a lot of the time going into the draft, obviously quarterbacks get the most amount of hype around them because it's the most important position on an NFL field. And very often throughout history, there are always kind of two quarterbacks at the top, sometimes three, but historically, two quarterbacks at the top of a class that people are always debating. Do I get this guy or do I get this guy? And then we kind of move on from there. And one of the funniest examples of all time was the 1998 NFL draft, where you had obviously the very tough competition between the future Hall of Famer and face of not one but two different franchises in Peyton Manning, or the equally important and equally as good Ryan Leaf. Obviously, looking at their career trajectories, that's very funny that this was even a debate at all. But it very much was. The Colts just happened to pick the right guy. But this happens a lot in NFL history. And and sometimes it works out for the best for the team that's picking first, and sometimes not so much. But I want to talk about one that I think it very much worked out for the team that picked first, but could have worked out for multiple different teams. And of course, I'm talking about the 2009 NFL draft class and the number one overall pick, Matthew Stafford. Yes, I'm making another Stafford video. Fuck you. Anyway, in 2009, the Detroit Lions were coming off of an 0-16 season. Obviously, everyone knows that. It was one of the worst teams in NFL history. It was the first 0-16 team in NFL history, and they had their fair share of quarterback problems. I mean, of course you would when you have an 0-16 record. They had 5 different quarterbacks play in the season. They had only 3 of them actually started any games, but you had Dan Orlovsky, who is most famous for being an idiot on ESPN and running out of the back of the end zone that one time. I gotcha. A 31-year-old Dante Culpepper, who he was a good quarterback when he was younger. In his Minnesota Vikings days, he was great. He got injured in back-to-back years. 2005 was his last in Minnesota. He wasn't off to a good start that year anyway, and then got hurt, and it was downhill from there. And they ended up moving on from him. And then in 2006, he went to the Miami Dolphins and absolutely collapsed there and wasn't anything. And then kind of bounced around for a little bit. And Detroit was his last stop in the league. He played 2008 and played a little bit in 2009. But he was obviously a shell of himself at that point. And then the third quarterback that started a significant amount of games was a 36-year-old John Kitna, who is one of the weirdest players in NFL history. In my opinion, he won 2003 Comeback Player of the Year, in which he played 16 games for the Bengals and had 3,500 yards, 26 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. But they only led him to an 8-8 record, which doesn't seem like a lot for Comeback Player of the Year. And then in 2004, he only played 4 games and only started in 3 of them. And then 2005, it was Carson Palmer. So it's a very weird career trajectory for him because he was in Seattle before and didn't really work out. Went to the Bengals and then went to the Lions and was terrible. Like I said, he started all 16 games in 2006. They went 3-13. And then he started all 16 games in 2007. And his numbers were just as bad in 2007, but they did go 7-9, and then in 2008 he only started 4 games. They moved on from him, and then he ended up finishing his career with Dallas. But people remember him, I think, more than they should for him being the caliber of quarterback that he was, which was not good. So anyway, that's kind of to set the stage for the Detroit Lions at their pick. And there were 2 quarterbacks, obviously at the top of the draft class, that everybody was talking about for the first overall pick that year. And those 2 were Matthew Stafford and Mark Sanchez. Josh Freeman did also go in the first round, but he wasn't really being mocked at the first overall pick anyway. It was mostly a battle between Stafford and Sanchez. Stafford, leaving college, had already played there for quite a long time. He was a Georgia product. If you read his draft profile when he came out, considered many to be the top prep quarterback in the country when he signed with Georgia. He led his high school to the first state title that they had since 1957. But he played really well against SEC competition, and he had marked improvement in a pro-style offense during the 2009 season. So really, a lot of people thought that he was going to be the guy. But there were some people that were saying that Mark Sanchez should go number one. He was the USC quarterback in 2008. He only was their quarterback for 1 year, which allowed a lot of people to kind of pause when he came out so early. But a lot of people thought, he had very in physical tools. Cerebral was even a word that was being passed around in his draft profile. Goes through progressions quickly and takes what the defenses give him, as opposed to Matthew Stafford. When you read his strengths, it says perhaps a bit shorter than preferred, but he has excellent bulk and strength for his position. Durable performer, despite a leaky offensive line. Efficient footwork, elite arm strength, can make all the throws. That is all things that I think still hold true for Matthew. His negatives, he says, can be fundamentally lazy. He should speed up his release a little bit. Sloppy footwork, which he does still have a tendency to get a little antsy with his footwork. And then when you read the negatives for Mark Sanchez, only 1 year as the starter, leaves with only 16 starts. They said he's not a finished project. He runs hot and cold and has tendency to score touchdowns in bunches. But he was very much characterized as being the guy who is going to read an offense more efficiently and be able to be kind of a game manager type. So going back to the draft, the Lions ended up taking Matthew Stafford at 1 overall, and I would say it worked out pretty well for them. They got their franchise guy who was around, even though, he didn't win a whole lot with the Lions. He still played there for 12 years, still is pretty much their leading passer in every single category, and especially when you compare that to Mark Sanchez, whose career, especially after his first 2 years, is kind of nothing. I think it's safe to say they made the right pick. But the interesting thing about this to me is that I almost think maybe the Jets might have won a Super Bowl, or at least been in one, with a young Matthew Stafford. Because when you think about it like this, Stafford obviously wasn't as good when he first came out as he is now, so you can't make that argument. But what I will say is that he was still better early in his career than Mark Sanchez. And when you had Sanchez, remember, was in 2 AFC championship games his first 2 years back-to-back, his rookie year and then in 2010. And it's not like they didn't beat anyone important. They beat the Colts and Peyton Manning, and they beat Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. So they were taking down some heavy hitters. They just couldn't get past the Colts in the 2009 playoffs, and then in the 2010 playoffs, they couldn't get past the Steelers. But they were still in back-to-back games. And it wasn't based on Mark Sanchez's play. Sanchez, his first year, threw just 2,400 yards, 12 touchdowns, even though he started 15 games, and 20 interceptions. And then his next year, it was a little bit improved, 3,200 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 13 picks. But his quarterback rating was still just 75. So obviously, you could improve there. And if you had the team around them, if you had the team around Matthew Stafford at that particular moment that they had around Mark Sanchez, I almost wonder if that Jets team maybe gets over the hump one of those years. I mean, they had Thomas Jones, they had Sean Green, they had LaDainian Tomlinson at running back, and then receivers, they had not a lot of big name guys, but they had Jared Cottrey, they had Braylon Edwards. Their offense was never the reason why they were in those games. It was their defense was absolutely amazing and completely stifling with the likes of Darrelle Revis and Kerry Rhodes and Dwight Lowery and Calvin Pace and Sean Hillis. They were first in the league in points against with only 236 given up all year, which is just 14, almost 15 points per game. So you wonder maybe one of those teams gets over the hump that year, right? In either 2009 or 2010. But even if that doesn't happen, it's also strange that the pick in between them, because the Jets picked at 5 and they settled on Mark Sanchez. The second pick that year, though, could have also been a quarterback. And if Stafford didn't go to Detroit, it's possible that he would have ended up with the Rams all the way back in 2009. The 2009 Rams had 3 quarterbacks as well end up starting for them. You had Mark Bulger, who played 9 games, started 8. Kyle Bowler, the bust that the Ravens had drafted a couple years before. And Keith Knoll. Anyone remember Keith Knoll? Woof, this was a bad era to be a Rams fan. But obviously it's one of those what-ifs that is just kind of funny when you think that Stafford could have been a Ram way back when. This team was obviously nowhere near the same caliber that the 2021 team was when he got there. So there's a chance that they never develop into the Rams that they are now if they had Matthew Stafford. Maybe they do eventually, but probably not. The early 2010s were probably one of the darkest periods in Rams history. And then that spirals a whole nother what-if situation where maybe he does go to the Rams this year, and both him and Mark Sanchez are considered busts. Maybe he goes on to be something else. And if they draft him in 2009, if he slips to the Rams and they end up picking Matthew Stafford, the next year they had the number 1 overall pick and they ended up getting Sam Bradford. So maybe Bradford doesn't go number 1 to the Rams because they don't feel like they need it. And with him being kind of the census number 1 overall quarterback in that draft and the top 2 picks being the Rams and the Lions, maybe somebody else trades up for Sam Bradford instead of him falling. In this situation, if the Lions had picked Mark Sanchez, for instance, and the Rams ended up with Matthew Stafford, neither one of them would really want to pick a quarterback the following year. Tampa Bay already had their guy in the 2009 class as well, with Josh Freeman, so they wouldn't be trading up either. Maybe that means that the 2010 Washington Redskins end up trading up to get a Sam Bradford. The 2009 Washington team was led by Jason Campbell, but in 2010 they let him go and they replaced him with Donovan McNabb, and that situation didn't end up working out the way that they wanted. But maybe if they had the opportunity to trade up for Sam Bradford, maybe McNabb doesn't go there, or maybe he does and ends up being a backup. Which then even spills into the 2012 draft class, because if Washington had Sam Bradford as a rookie, they wouldn't be in the market for RG3. My point of this video is NFL what-ifs are super fun. You could do this for literally every pick in the draft. Anyway, my inspiration for this video was just that the NFL Vault channel just posted a top 10 what-ifs in NFL history. And what-ifs... that list was fun, but it's also like so limiting. Only 10 of them is insane because you can go down so many different rabbit holes of this guy could potentially end up there and this guy could potentially end up here that can shape the entire NFL to be completely different. And one of the ones they said in that video, they were talking about what happens if Andrew Luck doesn't go to the Colts. Maybe they hang on to Peyton Manning instead of letting him go, in which case the Denver Broncos of the late 2010s that were in those Super Bowls probably wouldn't have been in that spot. And maybe the Colts get another one. Or maybe Manning only ends up with 1 in his career. In which case, do you look at his career differently? Who becomes the Broncos quarterback? They probably wouldn't have gone with Tim Tebow because John Elway had just gotten there, and he was the whole reason that they wanted to get rid of Tebow. My point with this video is saying, if you guys have any what-if situations that you think are just really fascinating, let me know in the comments down below in this video. Just type whatever you can think of. Even if it's completely outlandish, I'm just so curious about how many things that we take for granted as just being NFL fact and NFL lore could be changed by just one draft pick being a little bit different. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video, which will probably be a draft video, or the one that I'm working on right now. It's another what if. I'm going down a what if rabbit hole. You're just going to deal with it. All right, bye!